Hey everyone, Steve from Backcountry Gallery here, coming to you once again from the mobile BCG headquarters that is my camper. This time around, I actually have a 4-part video series for you, and this is a setup guide, basically a video setup guide for the Z6 III. And in the first part, we're going to look at the setup menu, then we're going to look at the photo shooting menu in video 2. In video 3 and video 4, we're going to cover the custom functions menu, the custom settings menu. So lots of good stuff coming your way. So this is video 1 where we're going to look at the setup menu, but before we begin, I'm going to preface all of these videos the same way, and that is that this is just some basic setup advice to kind of get you started. This is how I initially set the camera and the main things that I do with the camera. Now, my setup guide that's coming out in September is going to have a lot more information. So if you like this video, but you want to learn a little bit more about how to set all these features, alternatives to these setups, maybe settings that I don't mention here that are still useful for other photographers and wildlife photographers that are not necessarily relevant to this particular video, make sure you take a look at that book. There is so much more information in there. This is barely scratching the surface of what's in the book as far as information and tips and techniques. Oh, and one last thing before we start, I'm going to put the links for all 4 videos under all 4 videos in the description area. So once you're done with this, you can go down there, click number 2, and of course I'll put these videos into a playlist on YouTube that you can just kind of watch straight through. So let's jump into the setup menu. So let's go ahead and press the menu button on the back of the camera. Sorry, it's upside down. There you go. We're going to press that. It's going to bring us to the setup menu, as you can see on your screen. Now, the first thing that's going to come up, if this is a brand new camera, is language. It's going to ask you to set your language. I'm going to assume that you're probably going to have the right language set by default for your region, but just in case, you can come in here and set the language. So let's go back up to the top, though, and we'll start with the basics, and I'll work my way down. Again, what we're talking about here is going to just be the stuff that I'm concerned about for wildlife photography, stuff that I set. I'm not going to go into any alternatives or anything like that. That's kind of what the guidebook is for. So, and what I'm going to tell you about these settings is going to be basic so I can keep the video flowing and video brief. Again, every one of these features that I'm talking about, I have hints and tips and tricks in that setup guide for you that go beyond what we can do here in the video. And again, September, so you'll have to wait. So this will hold you over though. Format memory card, let's go there. So we have an option here. Right now I have a CF Express card in there. This will work similar with your SD card, except there is going to be a little bit of a difference with an SD card. But let's just say we want to format, give that a click. And we have 2 options. We have a full format and a quick format. So my rule of thumb for full format versus quick format is pretty easy. If I'm putting in a brand new card, I'm going to do a full format. If I'm putting in a card from another camera, I'm going to do a full format. If it's been maybe 10 or 15 or 20 cycles of quick formats, I'll probably go back and do a full format again. I like to do a full format every now and then because what has happened to me in the past is I've run into situations where I had a memory card going bad and I caught it when I was formatting. I got an error when I tried to format it. So that has saved me maybe 2 or 3 times in the past. I don't get a lot of bad memory cards, but still it happens. So I like to do those full formats every now and then. So in this case, I put a brand new card in here. So I'm going to do a full format. And when I do that, it's a little bit tricky. You have to go ahead and hit the delete button or press on the screen the yes button right there in order to complete that format operation. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the delete key. And it's going to format the memory card. And when you do it this way, it does take a little bit longer than a quick format. Now, if we go back in here and do a quick format, you'll see how quickly that goes. Quick format, boom, and it's done. It doesn't ask you okay. It doesn't have you confirm it. Just boom, like that. Now, if you're dealing with an SD card, you're not going to have the full format option. That's just basically a normal format. So let's move on. Next, let's go to Save User Settings. And basically what user settings are these U1, U2, and U3 options. Now, I'm just going to tell you about it for right now because what you need to do first is set up your camera. Because what this is going to do is it's going to remember what's in your custom settings menu. It's going to remember what's in your photo shooting menu. And if you're doing video, it's going to remember what's in your video menu. And it's going to save all of those along with AF area mode, your shutter speed, your f-stop, all that stuff. So if you go in and set all of that up, then you come into here where it says Save User Settings. Go over to Save to 1, 2, or 3 once the camera's set up and give that a click and you can save those settings. And then you're going to have all of those settings available just by going to one of those options, whichever one you pick here. So for example, let's say I want to have U1 set to action, which is how I actually have it set. So basically, since I'm doing wildlife, I don't have different settings usually in my photo shooting menu and my custom setting menu. They're all the same. So basically what I do, I go through, I set up the whole camera, and then I go through and I say, okay, what settings do I need for action? For the U1, that's the one I was programming. So I say, well, I want wide large, and I want 1/3200th of a second. I'm going to open my lens wide open to, in this case, f4. And if I had a 2.8 lens, I'd put that lens on and open it wide open to 2.8. I'd have my ISO settings set to auto ISO so that I could, there's not any messing around. I'm not going to have to worry about setting exposure if I have to immediately get into action. And then I can go ahead and save those settings once everything's done. So to do that, you just go into Save User Settings, and you can save to 1, 2, or 3. In this case, we're using 1 as the example, so we would go there and we just click Save User Settings. And that's all there is to it, pretty easy. And then when I go to U1 on my camera, anytime I do that, it's going to bring back that 1/3200th of a second, that wide large area, that wide open lens, all of that good stuff, and all of the settings that were saved in the photo shooting menu and the custom setting menu and the video menu at the time I told it to save those settings. So everything's going to come back there. And the nice thing about this is that you can go into like manual mode, for instance, and change a whole bunch of stuff. And then you can go back to U1 and boom, you have your other settings ready to go for you. And if you're in one of these user settings, like our U1, let's say I was at 3200th of a second, and I said, oh, that's a little bit too fast right now. The light's getting a little bit low. I want to start stopping down. So maybe I go to 1600th of a second. I think for whatever action I'm doing, that'll work. When I go back to U1 the next time, it'll go back to 3200th of a second. So it remembers those settings that you save. So if you adjust something in there, it doesn't change those settings on you like it does with photo shooting banks with the Z8 and Z9. In this case, it remembers it forever until you come back in here and change it again. So that's very handy. And again, the setup guide will go into this in much more detail, but I kind of wanted to give you an overview. I get a lot of questions on how that works, and hopefully that makes some sense to you. There's also an option to reset those settings if you like. I don't see much reason to do that since you can just resave them and it'll overwrite it. Let's go down here. Time zone and date. I think you know how to probably set those. Monitor brightness. I usually just bring that up by 1 notch. So the back screen here, the monitor on the back here, the LCD on the back is a little bit brighter. That's just my preference. I don't mess with the color balance. Next, let's talk about setting our viewfinder brightness. Now, in the original video, this was grayed out because I have it set to monitor only so that it's not a pain when I'm trying to explain the stuff in the menu, switching back and forth to the viewfinder. But if you want to set your viewfinder brightness, and I recommend you think about doing this, you can do it from this menu. Now, normally it's on automatic by default, but one thing that I found is that it kind of tries to adjust for the ambient light levels. And one of the disadvantages that I noticed is that the viewfinder gets a little bit noticeably darker as the light outside gets darker, which is a little bit annoying because I kind of want a bright viewfinder when it's getting darker, or at least a little bit brighter so I can see what's going on. So what I've done is I've come in here and I've set that to +2. And in order to do that, you have to highlight that, give it a click, and you have to be looking in the viewfinder in order to set it. You can't set it from the back menu here, even though it kind of looks like you can. So definitely take a look at that. And if you find that the viewfinder display seems a little dark to you, give that a try. Add +2 or +1. Start at +1, see what you think. I ended up at +2. And I like the brightness. Now, because of this 4,000 nit viewfinder, you can really turn it up. But at some point, once you really get it high, it's just a little bit ridiculous. It's too bright. But anyhow, just something to think about. Let's go down here. Now, viewfinder display size. This is one that I don't personally use, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway. So if we go over here, right now it's standard. There's also a small option. You'll want to use that maybe if you're using eyeglasses. If you wear glasses while you shoot, that'll make the image inside the viewfinder a little bit smaller, and it's a little bit easier to see so you can see the whole frame. So that's a little hint there. Next, I want to talk about the limit monitor mode selection option here. And I have to do it like this because with the Atomos plugged in, this doesn't work. So basically what this does, if I give this a click, you'll see we have automatic display switch. I usually want that on. That's going to be when you put your eye to the viewfinder, the image is going to go in there. And when you look down here, it's going to go over here. Okay. And I also like prioritize viewfinder 1 and 2. And what that's going to do is this back LCD is not going to turn on for photography. It's only going to come on if you press the menu button to work with the menus, or if you hit the playback button and you want to look at the images that you just took. So those are the two instances where it's going to come over here with the prioritized viewfinder options. So a lot of people like the automatic display switch so they can look here and go back, but you can switch these at any time you want by pressing this little button right here. This is just telling us what options are going to cycle with this button over here. So I usually don't like viewfinder only or monitor only. I do use monitor only when I'm filming stuff so that it's not flipping between them, but most of the time I have those two unchecked. Now, the prioritized viewfinders are pretty cool. Not only do they keep everything in the viewfinder here, but there's two options here. Now, the first one is going to put whatever's on the screen up here. So if I am in playback mode and I'm looking at it on the back screen and I want to see it in the viewfinder, I can just look to the viewfinder and I'm going to see the image up there. If I'm on prioritize 2 though, the second option, if I'm on that option, what's going to happen is if I'm playing back an image here and I see the photo here and then I look to the viewfinder, the camera is going to snap back into photo mode. And the reason for that is because maybe you're reviewing an image and suddenly something happens and you need to like start shooting. You don't have to mess around with hitting a half press or being fooled that what you're seeing in the viewfinder is actual real life. I know it's only a split second, but it does make a difference. So if I'm in an action situation, I might want prioritize viewfinder 2 so I can review my images on the back, and if something happens, all I have to do is look at that viewfinder and it'll switch over for me. So, and again, to select these, you just press this button here and it'll go through them. Now the prioritize viewfinder ones, you can see there, print 1, 2, and then it's automatic display switch, just like that. So it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy. So something to think about. Definitely take a look at this. And again, a lot of times people get confused about how, why they're not seeing something here or seeing something up here or something feels wrong with the monitors. This is the #1 cause. People forget that you can switch these displays around and switch these, viewfinder priorities around and automatic display switches around. So make sure you come in here, check the ones you want, and remember to use that button. Auto rotate info display, I leave that on. That means if you flip the camera one way or the other, the info display will stay like on the bottom if you're vertical, so you can still read it. It's not sideways, so that's pretty nice. I generally don't do any AF fine tuning with mirrorless, and I'm not worried about that. Distance units, I like the metric system, so I stay in meters, but if you're an American and refuse to do that, you can go to feet, but as an American, I am embracing the metric system. Next, we have safe focus position. This is very handy. I always turn this one on because what this is going to do is if you focus on something and shut your camera off without it on, what it's going to do is it's going to reset the focus distance when you turn the camera back on. So whatever you were focused on isn't going to be in focus anymore. I like to keep this on because a lot of times I'm waiting on an animal. Maybe I have an owl in a nest or something, or a raccoon in a tree or something, and I'm waiting for him to pop up and I don't want to kill my battery. So I'll focus on it and I'll shut the camera off as I'm waiting. Now, if I see that little head start to poke up, I'll turn the camera back on and the camera will focus right back to where the raccoon was, instead of like at infinity causing me maybe to miss a shot as I'm trying to refocus, right? So I leave that on. I don't have any PZ lenses, so I just shut this off. But if you want to save the zoom position, if you have a Nikon PZ lens, you could do that right here. Auto temperature cutout is standard. I usually just leave it there. I have not had any overheating issues with this camera at all. Clean image sensor, the defaults are fine there, I think, for most of us. Nothing here. Let's see, copyright information. If you want to add your copyright information, you can. I recommend doing so. You can turn that on. You can put your artist information in here. I'm not going to do it now. You could just type in here, just put in your name here, and then you can put your copyright in there. I recommend a format of copyright, your name, year, all rights reserved. Sometimes you can't fit it all, so just copyright, your name, and the year is usually okay too. But I like to put in all rights reserved if I can. Not the end of the world either way, because we can always add copyright information when we import our photos. But if you want to set your copyright information, it's here, and both the screens are identical. I recommend just using the touch screen, typing it in there. Very, very simple. And again, the setup guide will show you how to use this if you ever get in trouble with the screen. Not quite sure how to use it, but it's pretty simple. So let's go back over here. ITP, we're not worried about that. I'm not worried about voice memo, but camera sounds I am worried about. So you can turn the shutter sound on, which is a good idea. I think most mirrorless shooters like to hear it when they're shooting, because sometimes if you don't, you can sit there inadvertently taking a bunch of pictures. Now on this one though, I thought that the volume of 3 was pretty loud. So what I did is I went in here and I dropped that down to 1. I make that so I can just hear it. Now everybody's going to have a different preference there. Next, we have different types of shutter sounds that are, and Nikon has all these very descriptive names in here, type A, B, C, D, and E, but you can just kind of play with those if you want. Type A is the one I like. I don't really like any of the other ones. Some of them are okay, but I think type A works pretty well. I have the beep option off, so the volume and pitch don't really matter there. So basically on this one, I come in and I turn the volume down. That's all I do here. Silent mode, on or off, and right now I have it off, but I could come in here, turn it on if I wanted to. And I do put that on the I menu too, so I can turn that on and off too. So if I am shooting a sensitive subject, I can get rid of that shutter sound. Now, obviously, if you have a mechanical shutter going, you're not going to be able to get rid of all of the sound. But if you're using the electronic shutter, like I do most of the time, you can turn it into silent mode here. But again, I think it's easier from the I menu. Touch controls are on. I just leave those on. There's some options here, though, if you wanted to come in and just have it for playback only. So if you find that you're inadvertently touching the screen, just go to playback only. Sometimes that's better. Or you could disable it and just use the buttons. Glove mode is kind of cool if you're wearing gloves. I'm not wearing gloves now, it's summer. But if you're wearing gloves and you find the touch screen isn't working too well, you can turn that on, and it does help a little bit with the sensitivity. I'm not worried about that. I don't use anything there. Battery info is kind of handy. It'll show you how much charge you have left and the battery age and all that good stuff. I keep USB power delivery on so that I can charge my camera via USB. You should probably leave that on here because these don't come with chargers, right? Energy saving mode, we're not worried about. I don't usually do that. I'm not worried about that. Save load menu settings. Now this is a little bit tricky because we were saving user modes at the beginning of this video, right? And save load menu settings is a little bit different. This is to save the entire menu settings. Everything that you've done in these menus, you can save it to a memory card. So that's what this menu is about here. So if you want to save your settings to a memory card, and I recommend doing it. In fact, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll save my menu settings. I'll just put an old SD card in here and nothing else writes to that SD card. I don't want it to write to the CF Express card. But I'll put an old SD card in. I'll save my menu settings. I'll just keep that with me someplace handy. So if something ever happens, the camera gets all screwed up and I need to just go back to my defaults, all the stuff that I said initially. After I'm done setting up the camera, I'll just come back to this menu, save those menu settings, and then I'll have kind of a backup of my menu settings if I should ever need them. Or if you wanted to share them. You can reset all of your settings, which is actually what I did to this camera right before I started this video. So I'm starting from scratch here. So you can reset them or do not reset. I don't want to reset at the moment, but you can if you want to. And firmware version is down here if you want to check your firmware version. And of course, this is where you'll come to update your firmware if it comes down to that. And that does it for the setup menu. So make sure you head over to the next video, which is the exciting world of the photo shooting menu. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.